It's recorded.
Welcome everybody to our fourth academic lecture this week. So it's been a fantastic programme so far. So for anybody that's attended the earlier ones, welcome back. We're very lucky today to be joined by Dr. Ioannis at University of Bath. We're going to talk about education with psychology, and also Dr. Eleanor from the University of Sussex, and she's going to talk about straight psychology. Without any further ado, I straight over to Dr. Ioannis for the first 20 minutes to talk about education in psychology. Oh, just a note on any questions. You can type any questions you have into the chat box, either to the group, to everybody, or privately to Ms Shaza, and we'll answer those questions at the end. Thank you very much, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So, strict 20 minutes. I put my timer on to make sure I don't go over. To give you an introduction to education with psychology at the University of Bath. So my name is Dr. Ioannis Costas Batlle, and I'm the admissions tutor, but I'm also a lecturer on the course. So this is going to be a brief introduction to what this is, and I'm very happy to field questions afterwards. So what are we? So I come from the Department of Education, and this course, Education with Psychology, is jointly delivered by the Department of Education and the Department of Psychology. It is predominantly an education course and housed in the Department of Education. And what that means is about 70% of the course is education-based, and 30% is delivered by the Department of Psychology at the University of Bath. And we are a blend of social science units where we focus on the study of children and young people, particularly a critical focus on the study of children and young people. That is our main aim. And to get this point across, what this blend of social science units is this. I'd say we are a mixture of these four things. We take an interdisciplinary approach. We focus on children and young people from an education, psychology, philosophy, and sociological perspective. And we put them all together. And I guess the easiest way to think about what our course is I describe it as we are a problem-based degree instead of a discipline-based degree. And what that means is that we look at problems that affect children and young people, and we explore them from a range of disciplines, from these four disciplines. We are not a discipline-led degree. In other words, if we were a discipline-led degree, we would only do education, or we would only do philosophy. One being either disciplinary or interdisciplinary. One is not better than the other. It simply depends on what your interests are. So if you're interested in a mixture of these four disciplines, then maybe we are the course for you. If you're interested in just one discipline, like maybe just psychology or just sociology, maybe there's another course that is a little bit more suitable to you. So that's who we are, this mixture of disciplines, looking at children and young people in and problematizing who they are, problems that we have, issues they face through these perspectives. So a little bit about, excuse me, rankings, etc., which people tend to be interested in. So the Department of Psychology has just come forth in the Complete University Guide. We received the course of Education with Psychology, received 100% student satisfaction a couple of years ago, and normally student satisfaction is very high on our course, in the high 80s and 90s. And the reason why education, the Department of Education, doesn't appear in these metrics is because we're a small course of about 40 to 45 students. And apparently that is too small for these bigger table metrics. However, what I can tell you is that during teaching, now during the pandemic, the university recently surveyed all students across campus, and our department came top of the whole university in terms of student satisfaction. So students are satisfied with our approach to teaching and working with them, because we quite enjoy this cohort of 40 to 45, which is more intimate, and you get to really discuss issues around children and childhood with young people, with our students. So that's a little bit about us and the course in general. Let's talk a little bit about the course structure and the course content, what you could expect to do if you choose to join the University of Bath and Education with Psychology. I guess this would be the three main strands of what we do. we talk about three main issues throughout our course. We talk about social sciences and childhood. Childhood sciences, childhood, young people, all these issues from this blend of educational, sociology, philosophical perspectives. Of course, another main strand, the middle one, is psychology, because 30% of our degree is housed in the Department of Psychology, and some of our colleagues in the Department of Education also focus on psychological issues. So there's a psychological slant as well. And thirdly, you have research methods. Now, this is fundamental. You get research methods throughout year 1, year 2, and the ultimate goal of learning research methods is to prepare you for your final year dissertation in year 3, which is where you will go out and collect some data on a project that interests you and you're keen to explore and learn more about, and you will write a dissertation on this, which is a wonderful culmination to a 3-year degree. So what I'm going to do next and spend a little bit of time on now is going through the different types of units you can get in year 1, year 2, and year 3, just so you get a flavor of what the course is like. So in year 1, these would be the units you'd have to go through in year 1. And just so you understand the context of how our course works, our university has a year split into 2 semesters, semester 1 and semester 2. And you have 5 units in each semester, so you do 10 units across a year. That's how this works. We are a relatively rigid course when it comes to unit selection and unit choice, in the sense that in your first year, all your units are compulsory. In your second year, the majority of your units are compulsory. And in your third year, you have a bit more flexibility. In the second year, you do have a bit of flexibility as well to choose optional units. So I think that's useful to know, that what you see here are pretty much the units that you will be doing. There are other courses which are a lot more flexible, a lot more mix and match. So it depends on what you're interested in. So jumping back into these units, let me go through a couple of them. For example, the first one, mind and behavior, is a big psychology unit run by the Department of Psychology that runs throughout the entire first year. And that's bringing everyone up to speed on a core understanding of psychology. We have research methods 1, where I already mentioned the importance of learning research methods. We have a series of units, as you can see from the titles, that focus on education, that focus on different perspectives of children. We focus on philosophy, as I also mentioned previously, sociological perspectives. What is learning? We have, second from the bottom, deviance. This is one of my units. I love this unit, where we think critically. Who is deviant? What children are deviant? What does it mean to be deviant? How do we work with children who may be considered deviant? And lastly, of course, we have issues around the family. So these would be the kind of things that you'd be exploring and thinking about in year 1, which in turn would prepare you for year 2. Again, research methods appears to continue working on preparing for that year 3 dissertation. The second bullet point is a unit on interventions. Again, another of my units, where we think about what is an educational intervention? How can we implement an educational intervention? Why would this be useful to know if we're going to be working with children and young people? A series of psychological units focusing on social psychology, educational psychology, developmental psychology. So psychology keeps coming through, and we continue thinking about children in different types of contexts, in terms of childhood and youth, in terms of inequalities in low-income contexts. In the final year, you have inequalities in different contexts regarding children and young people. And as I mentioned, in year 2, you do get the choice to have some optional units. And in a couple of slides, I will list these optional units for you, or some of them. In your final year, as you see, you have fewer units. And the reason for this is that your dissertation, both dissertation part 1 and dissertation part 2, occupy the majority, or they occupy a big chunk of your final year, as it should be, because this is a big final year project, which is wonderful to engage in. But you still have further issues in terms of looking at contemporary issues, the second part of that unit, looking at educational psychology, developmental psychopathology, children and technology, which is another fascinating unit. And again, you get to pick some of your own units so that you can focus on areas that you are more interested in. And when we talk about optional units, well, these are some examples of optional units. Now, some of these units are delivered within the Department of Education and are housed within the Department of Education, but some of the units are delivered by other departments, like our Department of Social and Policy Sciences, for example. Or you may want to again return to the Department of Psychology for another optional unit. So this, in a way, depends a little bit where you want to go, and you have a little bit more flexibility here, particularly in your second and final year. So that is an overview of the course. And as you can appreciate, it's 3 years. And just as a little bit of useful information, your first year doesn't count towards your final degree classification. It's your second and your third year. Therefore, your first year is a wonderful opportunity to learn how to write essays, for example, at degree level. And I say essays because we are a very coursework-based degree. We try to avoid exams as much as possible. So we're very keen on essays, presentations, group work. So again, if your strengths lie in coursework more than exams, then maybe we are a degree that is more suitable to you. Now, a core bit of our degree are placements. And I would describe this as a unique selling point of our degree because a lot of our students choose to undergo a placement. And what this means is between when they finish their second year, they choose to spend a year but either working and gaining experience. And the way they do this is throughout your second year, you are supported by the university, and we have a dedicated placements tutor in our department who is going to support you in helping you get a placement. Now, I'll be very clear, it will be your responsibility to look for the placement, and you have to go through the process of applying for the placement, but you are supported all the way through in terms of getting support with your CV writing, cover letter writing. The university offers some repeat placement opportunities, and in a moment I will show you some examples of where some of our students do go on placement. And this is a magnificent opportunity to gain some work experience and test jobs out. Some students choose to do one placement over the span of a year. Some students choose to do two. That means you can do about 4, 5, 6 months in one setting, and then 4, 5, 6 months in another setting. And our students have said that when they come back from placement, they love trying out opportunities. And I guess the great value of this is if there is a job that you thought you wanted to do, a particular type of teaching, for example, or maybe working with a specific group of young people or children, and you test it out on placement and it doesn't work out, well, that's okay. That's useful information. You just need to complete placement, go back to university, and then you know you don't want to do that. Equally, maybe placement is an opportunity where you discover a passion for working with young children. And in fact, one of the students I spoke to recently decided to undergo a placement working with special education needs, children with SEND, and she ended up loving it. And that's what she wants to do after her degree. So where do our students go on placement, for example? These are some examples. A teaching assistant in Bristol, so near Bath, for example. There's some who just choose to pursue research assistant and become a research assistant, and that's happened, and we've had it for a couple of years in Boston, in the United States. Some choose to follow or pursue becoming more a support worker for CAMS in Islington, which is in London. And we continue to have some charity work and connections with charities such as Fiji and in Nepal. And these are just a snapshot of placement opportunities. And as I said, we have a dedicated placement tutor and a placement officer who support you through this process. This is not compulsory, by the way. I should be very clear. You can choose to do educational psychology and just do 3 years and go through the 3 years without pursuing placement. That is absolutely fine, not an issue whatsoever. A question I tend to get is when you apply for educational psychology, do you have to specify whether you choose placement or not? And is there a disadvantage either way? The answer is there is no disadvantage either way because you can switch once you're on the degree. So if you choose to apply without a placement and in your first, even beginning of your second year, decide you would like to do a placement, you can make the switch without a problem. That also happens the other way around. So there is no advantage or disadvantage applying with or without placement. Either is fine. So let's talk a little bit about entry requirements, just so you have an idea of what this degree aims or what's required generally to access the degree. So what I put here on the slide is a condensed version of what we call typical offers. If you go onto our website, you will see a whole host of permutations of different entry requirements, which may be more suitable if some of these don't map onto, excuse me, what you require quite nice and neatly. I would guess that the headline would be ABB in 3 A-level subjects. And we're very clear that we mentioned 3 A-level subjects. We do not require specific subjects, or we do not focus on specific subjects. What we are interested in are essay-based subjects, because essay-based subjects will prepare you for a degree like ours, as I mentioned previously, that is focused on essays and coursework. Now, if you have done psychology, an A-level in psychology, this would be advantageous and useful, but it is not necessary. And I'd say a good portion of our students have not done an A-level in psychology. And that's why we have that unit, that big unit I mentioned in year 1 called Mind and Behavior, that brings everyone up to speed. So the key thing is A-level subjects that focus on essay writing. Now, the International Baccalaureate, 35 points, BTEC, DDD, and then we have routes through access to the HE diploma, which I don't think applies, but I always like to keep it just in case. So this would be the key thing I'd say in terms of typical offer. And something which I'll mention now, which I'll preempt potential questions, is in a personal statement, what do we look for? And I'd say we look for 3 things. The first thing we look for is, what experience do you have of working with, volunteering, spending time with children and young people? And this could be anything, but it just shows your passion for working with children and young people, which is fundamental for our course. So that's the first one. The second one is, how does that passion or experience that you have of working with or volunteering with young children, how does that map onto or apply to this degree? Why do you want to pursue a degree in education with psychology? A degree which thinks holistically about how to work with children and young people, and that thinks about it critically and from a social justice perspective. Why does that experience, how does that map onto wanting to do education with psychology? And thirdly, how does education with psychology help you for your future? What do you think you could do, or how do you think this degree could enable you for the future? Now, let me be clear. We are not looking for you to tell us, I want to become X in the future. I want have a clear job I want to be. I think that that's an unreasonable ask. But we would expect that if you do pursue a degree in education with psychology, what you're interested in is in working with children and young people. And it would be useful to know roughly in what capacity. Do you have an idea of what age groups you like to work with, for example? Do you know what type of settings? Do you want to work in charities? Do you want to work in schools? So that type of thing would be useful. Now, possible career pathways. And I'm aware that I've got a couple of minutes to wrap up, so we're doing well with time. So what do some of our students do? Well, some of them pursue further study, because this degree helps you think about children and young people and working with them from a variety of perspectives. But some then choose to become teachers, and the way they do that is you then need to do a PGCE for another year to become a teacher, and then they move into primary or secondary teaching. Others choose to pursue other specialisms like music therapy or masters in humanities and social sciences, psychology and education, psychology of education, play therapy. And at this point, particularly focusing on that master's on psychology of education, I will clarify that our degree, education with psychology, is not accredited by the BPS, the British Psychological Society. And the reason it is not accredited is because we do not want to be accredited, because if we were, then we would no longer be able to have a holistic perspective, an interdisciplinary perspective of education, psychology, sociology, and philosophy. We'd have to take more of a psychological slant, which is not what we are about. So if you want something that is BPS accredited and you want a heavier psychological slant, we are not the course for you. But you can gain BPS accreditation, as some of our students have done, by doing our course and then doing a master's that gives you BPS accreditation. It entirely depends on where you want to go in the future. In terms of professional roles that some of our students go on to, well, some of them become teachers, others become teaching assistants, for example, focusing on special education needs. Others focus on preschool and early years. Some move into trauma recovery, as it says here, in terms of a more support worker type role. Others become learning assistants. Some focus on childcare. Others become more interested in training and curriculum development. And some become fascinated by research and want to move into research areas and become research assistants to explore research around children and young people. So I'm pretty much up at time. Hopefully this is giving you a snapshot of education with psychology. The only other thing I would add and leave at the very end before I finish is these are some other degrees offered by the University of Batlle, which may be more interesting if you're interested in just psychology or social work or more of social science. These are possible degrees which you may be interested if education with psychology is not quite your cup of tea, which isn't fair enough. And I guess to wrap up, my final piece of advice for anyone thinking of applying things is think of something that really suits you and resonates with you, and then you'll probably land on your feet. Okay, that's my 20 minutes. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ioannis. That was an amazing overview of education with psychology at Bath, all the way from that flexible first year, all the way through to even the masters, which you can do so many different things in after the course. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Please do be putting any questions you have into the chat or privately messaging Ms Shatter. I'm now going to pass over to Dr. Eleanor from University of Sussex to talk about straight psychology.
Thank you. I'm just going to find my slides. I'm going to move myself over to the left-hand side because then I won't block off stuff on my slides. Hope you can all hear me okay. And I'm glad that Ioannis and I are talking about slightly different courses, because I think it's a nice perspective on which courses might be best for you and which courses might fit your skills the best. So I'm Director of Recruitment and Admissions for Psychology at Sussex, and I'm also a Senior Lecturer in the Social and Applied Research Group. So what I'm going to be talking about today is the different psychology courses that we offer, and just a little bit about Sussex in general as a university. So Sussex, if you haven't heard of it before, is a university that's near Brighton, just on the south coast of England, about an hour's train ride away from London. And it's quite a unique campus-based university in the middle of a national park, but it's about 10 minutes away from Brighton. So it's kind of a nice mix of a campus-based location where most first years live on campus, but then also having close links to the city and to a really vibrant community in Brighton. And it's a university that has a strong international dimension. And psychology specifically at Sussex is a big community. So at the moment we have 1,500 undergraduate students. So about 500 new students join us every year. And we also have a big community of postgraduate students on our master's courses and PhD students. And because we have a lot of undergraduate students, that also means that there's a lot of us as faculty. So we have over 70 teaching staff, and sometimes students ask me at open days what Sussex tends to specialise in and which area of psychology we specialise in the most. And because we're quite a big school, I think the answer is we don't really specialise just in one thing. So we have big active research groups across behavioural and clinical neuroscience, social and applied psychology, developmental and clinical psychology, and also a lot of people working on research skills and methods. So Sussex generally is a well thought of university for research, but psychology especially. So we were ranked 10th out of 82 psychology departments in the last Research Excellence Framework, which is a government thing in the UK where they assess the quality of research at UK universities. And we were ranked 7th for research impact. So that means that the research that we do that you would be getting involved in as students has actually gone out and had an impact on society or the economy or on government policy. So at the moment, one of our academics that's in the news a lot in the UK is Professor John Drury, who does research on collective behaviour. And he's been part of the group that's been advising the government on how to respond to the coronavirus pandemic and the most effective ways of getting people to change behaviour collectively. So one of the things that we also think makes Sussex stand out as a psychology department is our teaching. So our faculty have won lots of national awards for teaching excellence and more than our fair share of awards from the University of Sussex for teaching excellence. And these are just some of the textbooks that our faculty have written. So I learned from some of these textbooks actually when I was a student in Manchester. So it was a strange experience to come down here and now actually be working with some of these people, especially Andy Field, who teaches statistics at Sussex. He's a bit of a minor celebrity in the world of statistics, and he's so excellent at teaching statistics and research methods, especially to people who are maybe a bit nervous about that aspect of a psychology course. So I think that's something that we're particularly good at. So the range of courses that we offer at Sussex, everyone in our school is on the BSc Psychology. So in contrast to the course that Ioannis was talking about, this is a course that has much more psychology so that we can give you the BPS accreditation. So it has just a different emphasis. And you can spend 25% of your time doing other subjects, but whatever you choose to do, whether you do psychology with a minor, or whether you choose not to do a particular minor pathway, your degree will have this accreditation that you'd need to go on and specialize later as a clinical psychologist or an educational psychologist, for example. So if you choose to do a minor, then we have 4 modules every term at Sussex, and you basically spend one of those doing a module from somewhere else in the university. So perhaps psychology with neuroscience, psychology with criminology is really popular. So psychology with business and management. So that's a way that you can just choose to specialize a little bit and get a bit more knowledge in another area that you think is linked to your future career aspirations. We also offer psychology with a foundation year that has lower entry requirements, and it's intended to really prepare people to do well in the main degree. So that's something that if we were to make you an offer and you miss the grades for our offer, but you exceed the grades for the foundation year, we'd automatically offer you a course change offer into the foundation year. So the way that we do things at Sussex is we cover all of the core requirements for the BPS accreditation in first and second year. So you spend the biggest chunk of your time in first and second year covering all of these different subjects that are going to be a little bit familiar to you if you studied A-level psychology. Although I should say that probably only about half of our students have studied psychology before. And it's not something that we require you to do as part of the entry requirements. So the kind of core topics that you'll cover are biological psychology, so the biological bases of mind and behavior. You'll study research methods, so that's statistics and data analysis. We'll teach you to code in R, but we will also teach you, you'll start to learn about understanding what makes good research, both how to carry out your own research, but also how to evaluate the quality of other people's scientific research. You'll study cognitive psychology, so that's things like learning and memory and perception. You'll study developmental psychology and how children do things like learn words and perceive colours. It's some of the research topics that people work on in our department. And then in social and applied psychology, you'll learn about things like intergroup processes and how psychology interacts with areas like health and environmental behaviour. So because we've covered all of the core topics in year 1 and 2, the way that things are structured at Sussex is you get complete choice in your third year over what you choose to study. So we have over 30 different options to choose from, and you pick 5 of those, and you do also a research project that's part of the BPS accreditation. So you choose a supervisor to work with, and you'll get involved in the research that they do, propose your own idea for a research topic, and carry out that piece of research. So your third year is spent entirely focusing on your own interests. So our students usually say it's the most intense year, but also the most enjoyable, because they're really able to focus on what they want to, really what their interests are. And we hope that by the time you actually make these choices, which is about 2/3 of the way through second year, you've actually learned a little bit about what your own interests are, and it might surprise you. So I definitely didn't, there were some courses that I did when I was a psychology student that I thought, this is going to be really boring, I'm not going to enjoy this bit of it, but I was absolutely fascinated when I learned about all of the things that I didn't know about that area. So what you might find that what you choose to specialize in isn't necessarily what you think it will be when you enter the degree. And hopefully by the time you make these choices, you've also got to know us a little bit, and you know which members of faculty you'd like to work with and be taught by. So the teaching methods throughout the degree, it's really a combination of large and small group teaching. So you'll have some lectures that are big lectures with everyone in your cohort. So we have lecture theatres that fit 500 people. But you'll also have much smaller seminars and practical sessions where you might either be discussing the readings in detail with one of us, or we might have you in a computer lab teaching you how to do something using our statistics programs, or a practical session where you're collecting data for a research project as one of your research skills modules. So it's a real mixture. And your contact hours vary depending on the different options that you choose to do. So everyone chooses some optional modules, which can be psychology with a minor, or it can just be things that you pick and choose. But probably 12 to 14 hours a week is the average for first year students. So at the moment, obviously, our teaching methods have had to change a little bit, as I imagine they have at your school. And we've got really a mixture of things that are happening in person and things that are happening online. So I have students at the moment learning with us from all around the world. I've got students from Thailand and South Korea, Malaysia and Mauritius studying on my module at the moment online, but we're also doing things on person in campus for people who are here who want to be there in person. And we're really just doing a mixture and trying to let every student learn in the way that they want to. And we've actually, there's a lot of things that we've been doing this year that we're going to keep actually. So a lot of the online engagement that we've been doing with students has worked really well. So we're hoping that by the time you might be starting, we'll be back to being able to do most things in person, but we'll also be able to offer you a bit more choice with what we've learned works really well online as well. So just like Ioannis was mentioning, with the placement at Bath, you have the opportunity to do a placement at Sussex, or you can do a study abroad year. So similarly, you don't make this decision until your second year. So for the year abroad, we have arrangements with hundreds of universities around the world that we can send students there, and then they will send us some students as well. So these are kind of already set up, and you just apply for the university that you want to go to. So universities in North America, actually Canada has become more popular than North America than the United States at the moment, but also Amsterdam's really popular. They have a really good social psychology program that some of our students have been to do. We've had students going to Malaysia, which you probably won't be interested in, seeing as that's where you've come from. But Australia is really popular as well. And there's universities all around the world where you can go and study for a year if that's what you'd like to do. If you do that, you don't have to study entirely psychology, but we expect you to study at least 50% psychology. And also you can do a placement. So you make your decision about that and make your applications in second year. So like Ioannis was mentioning, it's not a guaranteed thing. It's essentially just you're applying for jobs, and the placement, the people who are offering the placement choose which students to take for which particular placements. But what we will do is do everything possible to make you a really good candidate for the placements that you want to do. So one of the slightly different paths with placements with this particular degree compared to education with psychology is that you can do placements within the NHS working as an honorary psychologist. So we have arrangements set up with various NHS trusts in the UK where you could get that kind of clinical experience that's really useful if you see yourself going on afterwards to have a clinical career. But you're not limited to just placements that are related to psychology. You can apply for any placement. So these are just some of the places that our students have been recently. Our Careers Centre advertises about 1,300 placements with organisations around the UK and abroad, and we can help you figure out what opportunities might be best for you. So the student who worked at Vodafone is one of my students, actually. He worked in the Human Resources Department at Vodafone last year, and it's really nice because it's informed what he's been doing for his final year research project. So my research area is self-regulation. I'm really interested in how people try and achieve the goals that are important for them and why people might fail sometimes, and things like procrastination. So what he's studying is the effect of working from home on people that he used to work with, because he now has connections with this organization, and how that's impacted their self-regulation and how that's related to social support and social connection. But these other placements include clinical sort of things, but also there's a lot of teaching related and research placements. So our students often go to other universities to work as research assistants, or go to government organisations like Public Health England to work helping them to analyse data. So it's something that, again, it's optional. It's up to you to decide whether or not a placement is best for you, but it can be a really nice opportunity. And just to say a little bit about employability and what our students do afterwards. Psychology in general has at Sussex is one of the degrees that has the best employability statistics. And I think there's various different reasons why employers like psychology graduates. So we'll teach you on the psychology course to think critically, to communicate clearly, and to understand and analyze data, which are skills that are so valuable for a really wide range of jobs, even those that aren't specifically about psychology. So our 96% of our students in the last national survey that we had were in work or further study within 6 months of graduation, and the vast majority of people who were in work were in graduate level jobs. Careers pathways after psychology. So there are some specific opportunities that the accredited psychology degree opens up. And most of those involve postgraduate study of some kind. So you might go on to study either at master's or PhD level, depending on the particular career path that you're going down. But all of these require the GBC, which is the graduate basis for chartered membership, with the BPS, the British Psychological Society. Once you have that undergraduate degree covering all of the broad content in psychology, that qualifies you to go in and specialize afterwards. And this is something that we can be talking to you about throughout your degree and helping you to understand what you might do to really maximize your chances of going down the career path that's right for you. But probably the majority of our students don't go down these career paths. So about a third of our students tend to go on and qualify in one of these particular career routes. And the destinations of the rest of our students are really varied. So if I think about the references I've written for my students for jobs recently, I've had students going into research and data analysis roles, both in the government, but working also, one of them now works at the BBC, doing a data analysis job. So applying the skills that she's learned in psychology, but in a role that isn't a psychology specific role. A lot of our students go into teaching. So I have a student who's just become an A-level teacher in psychology who graduated a couple of years ago. A lot of our students go into roles like human resources and marketing and advertising, where you can see why an understanding of human behavior would be really useful for those particular roles. And our students also go into kind of more applied settings, working for the government or the police. But there's such a broad range of things that students do afterwards. And I think psychology students are generally viewed to be really employable. So very briefly, just applying for a place. So the typical offer level that we have is ABB at A-level in any subjects. We don't require you to have studied psychology. In contrast to what Ioannis was saying, probably for this course, we do also equally value maths and science, as well as essay subjects, because this degree is really a mixture of both of those. So A-levels that you've done where you've written a lot of essays and developed your written communication skills will be really valuable, because about half of your assessment on this course will be written coursework and about half of it is usually exams. But also, if you studied biology or maths before, that will obviously be incredibly valuable to you in learning biological psychology and helping you do well with the research skills modules. Because psychology has quite a heavy research methods and statistics component, we have a GCSE requirement of grade B or grade 6 in maths, or the equivalent in a different qualification. And what we're looking for in your personal statement, Ioannis had 3 things. I think I have 2 things. Those 2 things are evidence that you'd be committed to this subject and evidence that you'd be capable of studying this subject. And the more that you can back any of those things up with specific examples of things that you've done or things that you've read or things that you've been involved in, is really helpful, because it just helps to bring you to life for me as an admissions tutor as I'm reading your application, and to really understand why this is the best course for you. So that's me. Thanks for listening to this. I hope that's told you a little bit about what we do at Sussex and about a psychology degree specifically, and I'm really happy to answer any of the questions that you've been asking as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Eleanor. So now what I'm going to do is just ask a few questions to both of you. The first one that was sort of touched on is in the chat, is the EPQ. So first, for Dr. Ioannis from Bath, how do you view the EPQ as part of the Bath requirement?
We love it, basically. So that's absolute. And in fact, I think did Joseph mention in the chat that, yeah, our entry requirement, our typical offer is ABB, but there is sometimes a route in with BBB and an A star on an EPQ. And if the EPQ, of course, if there's any focus around childhood and young people, even better, but we're very keen on EPQs.
Fantastic, thank you. And how about you, Dr. Eleanor? How does Sussex view the EPQ?
It's definitely something that we really value. And it's not something that is part of our formal offer that we make, but it's something that if you were to maybe miss the conditions of our A-level offer, then but you also had an EPQ. That's absolutely extra evidence to show us that this is the right course for you and that you'll be able to do well on the course. So it's not part of the standard tariff that we ask for in our offer, but it's definitely something we view as being a really positive thing that you've done and a valuable experience.
Fantastic, thank you. And again, this one is to both of you, and it's about the placements. So one of the questions was, if you do the placement year, are you likely to be employed by the person you do a work placement with? Is there possibility of employment there? So
I know students,
maybe, yeah, with, yeah,
I know students from Sussex who have gone on to work in the same, definitely students who have gone back to work in the same place afterwards. But so that's definitely happened. I mean, I know students who, so I have one student from a couple of years ago who did a clinical placement for the year in between her second year and her final year. And then during her final year, she went back to volunteer with them. Or actually, I think she worked for them 1 day a week and was still paid by them to carry on working on that research project. And then what she did when she graduated was that she worked as an assistant psychologist half-time, but worked as a research assistant for the same group that she'd been working with on her placement half-time as well. And then she went on to do a clinical psychology doctorate. So that's one example of how someone maintained their relationship that they built during the placement in their future career afterwards. So it definitely happens, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And question, Dr. Ioannis.
Yeah, so of course, they're in the same way as Eleanor said, it's certainly a possibility, and I know it's happened with some students, but it's not a guarantee, of course, and it depends on the placement provider. And I guess something to bear in mind is that the type of placements that people tend to pursue in education with psychology are placements which traditionally are not the richest, such as charities, NGOs, schools in certain deprived areas, and sometimes placements are unpaid, so that's something to bear in mind, and that's why some of our students live at home to minimize costs and to be able to pursue their placement. But in some opportunities, you create those links which then enable you to return. But of course, it depends on the placements what they can provide in terms of jobs. So it depends, but it can happen.
Okay, fantastic. And again, this is another question for both schools. What is the coursework exam percentage breakdown, roughly? So maybe just taking that first year, what would the coursework exam percent breakdown be in your first year? So starting again, maybe with Dr. Ioannis.
So we have the immense majority is coursework. And when I say immense majority, I know mind of behavior in the first year is an exam. So I think in your first year, if memory serves me right, of your 10 units, maybe 2 of them are exams and the rest is coursework. And that's pretty much replicated throughout the degree. So we have the bare minimum exam. The university forced us to have a minimum number of exams. We use that bare minimum and the rest is all coursework. So we're very coursework heavy.
I can see why you value essay-based subjects then, Ioannis, in your degree. I think it's a little bit different at Sussex. It's probably about half and half, exams and coursework. So in your first year, you'll have a lot of smaller coursework assignments throughout the term, where you might be learning to write lab reports or writing essays and getting feedback on those essays and then writing other essays. And then you have exams in the January term that assess everything that you've learned in the autumn term. So we have had to make some temporary changes this year because we weren't allowed to hold exams in person. So some of our modules have changed to essay-based things. It used to be exams. I've learned from that some students absolutely loved exams and are really sad that they don't get to do the exams, which is not how I felt when I was a student. But it is a bit of a mixture. And at Sussex, in third year, the balance of assessment is completely up to you because you are choosing all of the different modules that you're doing. So some students specifically choose modules with all exams or all coursework, depending on their interests and their strengths.
Great. And this is probably for you, Dr. Eleanor. There were 2 particular psychological routes that were asked about, which is an occupational psychologist and a forensic psychologist. Would you be able to just expand a tiny bit on both of those pathways?
So occupational psychology, so that's one of the ones where you go on to do a master's course and then potentially a PhD afterwards. And what you do in that course is, so we have a master's course at Sussex that's occupational organisational psychology that's taught jointly by psychology and the business school. And what you learn in that course is how to work within businesses. And you look at things like leadership, a bit of marketing kind of content, but also just how to make organizations work effectively and get the most from people. So you can then go on to work as an occupational psychologist in quite a wide range of settings. Forensic psychology, it's not something that we offer as a specialism at Sussex at master's level, but it's something that there's various places in the UK that you can go and study that. And you might be working in an applied setting like a prison. I'm not an expert on that career path actually, but I know that it's one that a lot of our students are kind of considering when they choose to do courses like psychology of criminology. And I know that we do have people at Sussex who do that kind of area of research. So we've had students go and work in prisons or do research in collaboration with those kinds of organizations.
Oh, fantastic. And Ioannis, is it mostly going into an educational psychologist if you were to do education with psychology?
You can move into becoming an educational psychologist if you want to, but that's not necessarily the case. In fact, so I think one of the strengths of our degree is that it is holistic by nature, which means you have this interplay of disciplines, so you can move in many, many directions. So some people may choose to pursue further study to then switch and move into educational psychology, but that is not necessarily the route. You can move into many other aspects, as I mentioned, in terms of teaching, working with children in charities, NGOs, special education needs. So it's a whole host of possible routes.
Hey, there is one question which I'm not sure you'll be able to answer in its entirety, but for our Malaysian nationals, if they become registered psychologists in the UK, can they come and work back in Malaysia as a psychologist?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure actually on the accreditation requirements in Malaysia. So it's probably something to look into before you were to do your postgraduate course. I'm pretty confident that the UK university undergraduate degree would qualify you to go on and do further study on that topic in Malaysia, but I'm not certain exactly which of our courses you'd need to do in order to be qualified to practice as a therapist. I mean, I think one of the things there is that there are a lot of different ways to be involved in therapy or mental health work. There's various different paths that you can do. So you can do a clinical psychology doctorate, but there's also different courses that you can do that would train you in different types of therapy. Some of them aren't at doctoral level, and some of them would just qualify you to do something a bit more specific, like a more specific type of therapy with a more specific group of people. So we have some postgraduate certificates and diplomas at Sussex in things like cognitive behavioural therapy, that don't require so much study, but they do qualify you to do one particular kind of therapy. I noticed someone also asked about being a psychiatrist, which is another thing again. So that actually involves doing a medical study first. So you would be wanting to do a medical degree rather than a psychology degree if you did that career path. But yeah, I hope that's useful.
Yeah, no, that's very useful. So there's a question here, which is, why do you think students would choose not to do a placement? Is there any reason why you would choose not to do a placement?
There's quite a few reasons. Some of our students just want to do the 3 years, so they'd like to get the degree done. And that could be for financial reasons, because even though you do go on placement and you pay reduced fees, you still have to pay fees. And some students would rather not do that. They'd rather just get the degree done. Some of them choose to do their placement, what I would call informally, during the summers, and they use their summer break to work with children. In fact, one of my personal tutees over the past years used her summer breaks to effectively accumulate placement experience without support from the university, like a proper placement or like the official placement process would, but she did it in her own time in the summers and still accrued experience, and that gave her a scope of meeting people and providers to then go and collect data with for their dissertation. So it depends on your personal situation, financial situation, and whether you just want to get done with your degree and then move on. So it's doable, and you can still produce wonderful dissertation work without going on placement.
So do you think it's a disadvantage at all choosing that route?
Not necessarily. I think it depends on the individual. I will say that those who do go on placement, we do notice a change in them from second year to third year. When they return, there is an almost intangible higher focus, more commitment to the degree, because they've understood how the degree can be applied in real life, and they've experienced the real world, so as to speak, and really want to get to grips as to how the final year of the degree can help them explore a particular issue in the real world. So to me, it feels quite advantageous, but we have students who go straight through and they still do wonderful work and end up wonderfully at the end of the degree. So, and they're fine as well. So it's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination.
To add to what Ioannis said, I think some of our students don't necessarily know what they want to do in second year, so they're not sure what placement would actually be right for them and they need a bit more time to think about it. There's also very practical reasons, like some of our students think that they might want to do the placement, but actually they want to go into third year with their friends and live in a house with their friends, and that social support just feels really important for them. And then it just changes their decision about whether to do the placement now or whether to get that experience after they graduate. And there really isn't, students go on to have really successful careers, whichever of these options they choose. If you know what you want to do, you can get started more quickly, I think, by doing the placement and giving yourself, especially with the clinical placements, really making yourself stand out from other people when you're applying for graduate jobs. But it's just about what's right for each student, I think. And the dissertation is almost always completely separate from the placement. So it's something that you would do separately, that you don't necessarily have to have done a placement or developed a relationship with a business in order to collect that data and do your own research project. So it doesn't disadvantage you in any way.
Okay, that's great. And you've both sort of talked about the student making the decisions and finding the best fit for them. What student support is available on the academic side, but also the social side? So maybe Dr. Eleanor, will start with you for that one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have various different levels of student support. So everyone's allocated an academic advisor at Sussex, who's a member of faculty in psychology that is the person who gets to know them the best. So it's someone that you'll meet one-on-one throughout your degree, who gets to understand you and your motivations and your strengths and weaknesses and talk to you about potential career paths afterwards. And I think I'd encourage everyone in this talk, no matter where you go and what you end up studying, to really take advantage of those opportunities to interact with us one-on-one, because it's something that I don't always get to know my advisees very well if they don't kind of take the opportunity to come and have meetings with me and get to know me. But it's such a nice opportunity when I do, and I'm able to give them so much better advice on what's best for them, but also write better references for them afterwards, because I really know them well and I'm able to write about why they would be so great for a particular job. So at Sussex, the academic advisor is one level, but we also have a student life centre and a student support centre that are available to connect students to whatever other sources of support they might need. So the student support unit works with students who need particular accommodations for learning. So that might be mental health, it might be physical disabilities, anything that you need done slightly differently for you in order to help you learn effectively. They'll work with you and set up a personalised programme of adjustments that they'll communicate to everyone who's teaching you so that we know what you need in order to learn well. The Student Life Centre might help you find housing, might connect you to university counselling if that's something that you need, and there's kind of various different sources of support available. And within psychology, we try and organise as many social events and small group things as possible to really connect students with each other.
That all sounds really good. Dr. Ioannis, how about Bath University?
Yeah, we offer very similar to what Eleanor is saying, and I really want to stress exactly what Eleanor said, which I agree with 100%. Take the opportunity to really, we call them personal tutees instead of, you call it advisors or advisees, I think you said, Eleanor.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. We call them just personal tutors, or I'm a personal tutor and I have my personal tutees. It's a wonderful opportunity to get to know, from a tutee perspective, get to know your tutor, especially just so tutors can advise you, support you through. So you have that point of contact the moment you start the degree, and that personal tutor remains with you throughout the degree. It is a member of staff, and it is a member of staff within our department, because not just someone who teaches on education with psychology, but someone who can also teach in the master's programs or doctoral level programs. So it is shared across the department, which is lovely. And you will also have student services, which again, very similar to what Eleanor was saying in terms of supporting your mental health. If you have any particular aspects or ways that would enhance your learning, this is a way through. Student services then communicate with us, we communicate with them. We have the Academic Skills Center, which are focused on helping you with your essay writing or coursework. There's the Employment Skills Center, which can help you with writing CVs in general, cover letters, all that support. And finally, I think one of the key strengths of our degrees that it's small. The cohort is small, 40 to 45 students. So it feels quite intimate. You have about 10 members of staff teaching you throughout the degree. So again, it feels quite intimate and there's a nice support network and students get to know each other. So I guess, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Fantastic. So it sounds really good at both universities, the support levels in place. I think we've got time for one more question. I think this one is going to be for Dr. Eleanor. What would you say are the main differences between a counsellor, a psychologist and a psychiatrist? I know you touched on this earlier, saying the psychiatrist would be the medical route, but what would you say those main differences are?
So a counsellor there's different types of counsellors, but a counsellor is doing a particular kind of therapy, so talking therapy with people. A psychiatrist, I actually don't know much about that career route because it's very medical based. So you study a medical degree first. You can actually do a psychology degree as part of your medical degree. So we have medical students who take a year out to come and study psychology with us. So you can kind of combine those together, but I know a little bit less about that career path. But what you might be involved in there is more kind of the biological side of things. So psychiatrists can prescribe drugs to people and might work in different kinds of clinical settings. A psychologist can mean a lot of different things, I guess. So that third one could mean various things. And as I said, opportunities to get involved in careers supporting people with mental health and helping people in various ways. There's so many different things that you could go into and so many different ways in which you could qualify to actually do things that help people with their mental health and various different groups of people that you could choose to work with. So if you did a clinical psychology doctorate, there's so many different things you could go on to do with that. So I have friends who did clinical psychology. One of them works in an oncology ward, giving therapy to people who've just been diagnosed with cancer. One of them works exclusively with people with learning disabilities, and one of them works exclusively with families and children who have been in care and children who've been adopted, doing family therapy with them. So there's so many different pathways that you can take. And it is a bit confusing. Really, what you would be looking to do is to figure out what's best for you and what kind of thing that you would like to be involved in, and then target a particular career opportunity that you think will teach you those skills and enable you to work in the setting that feels like it's where you'd like to be. Sorry if that was a bit vague.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good answer, because it's all under a similar umbrella, but they're very different things when you're actually doing them as a job role. So I think that's all the questions, and we're coming on to 6 o'clock. So thank you so much, Dr. Eleanor from University of Sussex and Dr. Ioannis from University of Bath. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us all today. And thank you everybody for coming, all students and parents that have attended today. It's really lovely to see you, and you can leave the Zoom meeting anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please feel free to contact us if you have any more questions.
Same here. Thank you very much, everyone.
We'll be providing the email addresses of both Dr. Eleanor and Dr. Ioannis for you to contact, and there will be a recording of this session on the students' Google Classroom.
Wonderful.